Hello and welcome to the CinemATL Podcast. The CinemATL Podcast is a weekly podcast that examines the world of entertainment through the lens of local Atlanta filmmakers. That would be us, your hosts. I am Michael D. Friedman, and that is
Martin Kelly.
And this week, Marvel's back at it again with The Eternals, which is releasing on November 5th. But Martin and I were lucky enough to see an advanced screening. Where does this film rank in the MCU? We'll find out in our non-spoiler review. But first, Martin, why don't you tell our audience how they can help the podcast out?
Well, you can help us out if you comment, rate, subscribe, and share it from your favorite podcast format, which could be, Apple Podcasts, could be iHeartRadio, could be SoundCloud, could be Spotify, maybe Amazon or Stitcher is more your bag, or Google Podcasts. You can even find us on YouTube.
Yes, and we also want to hear from you. You can always tweet us. We're available at CinemATL, or you can get us at our personal Twitter accounts. Mine is at CleverTransient.
Or hit me up at Marte_Real1.
And don't forget our Instagram, which is at CinemATL Podcast, all one word.
Yep, or you can always check us out on the good old web at CinemATL.com.
Well, let's just get into it, shall we? All right, so Eternals, yes. Marvel's third feature release this year, believe it or not.
Yeah.
The Eternals tells the story of a race of immortal beings who have secretly protected Earth for thousands of years and have helped shape its history. But when an evil force known as the Deviants return, the group must make its presence known again. That's the brief synopsis without telling you a bunch. And just a reminder, we're not going to go into spoilers into this review.
So, no, definitely not. But this film is directed by Academy Award winner Chloe Zhao. She, of course, won the Academy Award for Nomadland. She also wrote the screenplay with Patrick Burley from Ant-Man and the Wasp, Ryan Firpo and Kaz Firpo, their cousins. And they mainly actually worked in documentaries, which is kind of apropos because Chloe Zhao's filmmaking style up to this point has been almost documentary style, actually.
Right. Yeah.
Of course, the Eternals is created by the great Jack Kirby of Marvel Comics fame.
Legendary Jack Kirby.
Yes. Absolutely. And the cinematographer is Ben Davis, who also has been in the MCU before with Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers Age of Ultron, Doctor Strange, and even Captain Marvel. So Ben Davis is certainly a veteran of MCU.
Yeah.
The cast includes Gemma, I think it's Gemma Chan from AMC's series called Humans, which she was really good in that. Actually, I've seen a lot of that series, and she's fantastic at that. And she's also got a big part in Crazy Rich Asians, and she plays Cersei. Richard Madden, known for this little television show from HBO called Game of Thrones, he plays Icarus. The great Angelina Jolie plays Thena. The great Salma Hayek plays Ajak. Kit Harington, who's also on that little HBO show called Game of Thrones, he plays Dane Whitman. And, there's more to him than meets the eye, but he's not a Transformer. Another HBO veteran, Kumail Nanjiani from Silicon Valley, and of course The Big Sick, his film debut. He plays Kingo. And Leah McHugh, who I wasn't really that familiar with.
Right.
I guess she's from American Woman, and also from The Lodge, apparently, which I've never seen, unfortunately. She plays Sprite. Brian Tyree Henry, who we know well from Atlanta, the TV series. He plays Fastos. Lauren Ridloff, who I didn't really remember that she was in The Walking Dead, but also in The Sound of Metal. She plays Makari. And then Barry, I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Barry Cohen. Keegan. Okay. He's known for Dunkirk, but also two very strange movies. A very strange film from I'm going to blank on his name, but the director of The Lobster in a film, his second film before he did the movie with Olivia Colman that won so much acclaim. Barry Keegan is in that film, and so
The
he may
killing of a
not be.
sacred deer. Is that the one you're
Yes,
talking about?
yes, exactly, and that is a very odd film, and so you may not have recognized him previous because he's kind of hit. He was not that hidden, I guess, in Dunkirk, but he definitely didn't stand out as much as he does in that film.
Yeah.
Don Lee from Train to Busan plays Gilgamesh, and Harish Patel from Hulu's For Weddings and a Funeral plays Karun, and he's certainly fun to watch actually in the film.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, big cast.
Yes,
There's a bunch of Eternals. So uh, we can get into the discussion of the film, and maybe the fact that the cast is so big and I actually really enjoy the cast, but it
yes,
could be one of the
yeah,
detriments of the film is that there are so many characters, and it's hard
yes,
to really get to spend time with so many characters when you're introduced. They're all being introduced too. It's not like the Avengers where they had their own movies beforehand. These are all
right.
brand new characters, and having them all introduced in one movie, even though the movie is what, like 2 hours and 45
At
minutes
least,
long,
yeah,
it's still hard to get a handle on all the characters, and feels like some characters that you like might not get enough screen time as you'd like, and
yeah. I think that's. I think you hit the nail on the head when we start discussing. I think this is going to be what kind of is the detriment to the film is that Chloe Zhao does have a lot of characters to deal with, and she tries to deal with them admirably, and so it ultimately sort of takes away a little bit of the momentum of the story by spending so much time with all of these characters.
right.
And as good as the cast is, it's not it's not to say that the characters all hold up.
Yeah, and I agree. And I guess so we might as well just start talking about the cast and the characters. But like I said, I think the cast is really good in this. I love the fact that it's very diverse cast, and just really good actors involved in this. I'm actually one of probably the few people in the world who has not seen Game of Thrones. So Richard Madden as Icarus was kind of a revelation to me. I thought he was great in
Yes,
this. I thought his role was very nuanced and very. Out of all the characters in the film, I think he has the best storyline and the most stakes of the film, and I
right,
thought he did a
right.
great job with it. I thought he was really good.
Wow, yeah, you really ought to get into Game of Thrones because Richard Madden's terrific, and Kit Harington actually, who's seen
Right.
less in this film, is terrific in Game of Thrones. So
I
you're
did
missing
see
out a
Kit
little bit.
Harrington in the what is it, 9 Days in Hell
Yes,
with Andy Samberg. He's great in that.
yes, which is a crazy departure for him, but yes,
Right.
it was funny.
But yeah, so Richard Madden was great, and I thought Gemma Chan was. She's probably she's like one of the other, like, I would, if you had lead characters in it, would be her and Richard
Hmm.
Madden.
Absolutely.
I thought she did a very solid job. I loved Kumail Nanjiani, but I always love
Yes,
him. I
yes.
think Brian Tyree Henry is a great. I love him too, and I think his character could be really awesome. I would love to see more of him. I don't. We
Hmm.
don't see enough of him, in my opinion.
Yep. Yep.
Um, Lauren Ridloff, who I love in Walking Dead, she's really puts on a great performance again, and it's interesting that they would choose a deaf character to be
Yeah.
one of the leads. It's kind of interesting.
No, I think this is the first deaf superhero, if you want
Right.
to say, which is great.
Well,
I
in
think
the,
it's
in the
fantastic.
in the cinematic world, and
Right
I'm
in the
sure
cinematic world, but
and I really like Barry Keoghan too. I thought he was really good as Druig. Um,
what's it's funny. It's hard for me to like him just because of the other film. Honestly, but
well, he's
he does a fine job. You're right,
and
but
his character is really kind of not supposed to be likable, honestly,
yeah,
in this, and that's, I think he does a good job with that. And
yeah, great casting. I
right.
think.
And I also love Don Lee, who I think he's the best part of Train to Busan. And if you haven't seen Train to Busan, I've mentioned this on this podcast before.
Yes, you have.
Really good film, and it was great to see him in an English speaking role. Um,
Definitely, and I think you're right. The cast is really great, and the shame of it all is that you don't get to see
Right.
enough of the ones you really like, and it gets it gets difficult, and Angelina Jolie and Salma Hayek, they do a
Yeah.
fine job
It's kind
as
of ironic
always.
that
Yeah.
they are very like their characters are important, but they really the screen time for them is
Yes.
since they're the big. Most of these actors are coming from the world of television,
Hmm.
which when I was going through the list, I was like, wow, all these people are coming from mainly television stuff, and the two big actresses that we have, movie stars, are really kind of put to the background a little bit in the
Yep.
film. It's kind of
Yep.
interesting.
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, it was good. I mean, it's refreshing actually to see them, kind of be comfortable with that, taking the
Right.
background a little bit, and like I said, kudos to the casting and actually the composition of the characters. I think that's a really great thing, to be commended. But again, it goes back to like maybe there's way too many.
Right.
Which is sad to say because you like seeing all these different kind of characters and all these different folks represented, and yet it may have harmed the narrative. In my opinion.
I think so as well. And there's a lot of story to tell too, which
Right.
also kind of to the detriment of what this film really is. And we can talk about this a little bit. We're not going to talk about the plot too much, but the tone of the film is very different than other Marvel movies. This is really about you know building up these characters and their relationships and how they're like a family almost.
Hmm. Hmm.
And to because it's so big, you don't like that's the best part of the movie, but it's also trying to shoehorn these big action sequences in and shoehorn this big story, this huge story that takes place over thousands of years on Earth.
Yeah.
So it's like something's going to get lost in the shuffle, and it kind of makes the film a little uneven in that regard.
Yes, I
For me,
agree.
right?
I agree. No, and so I guess we've talked a lot about the cast. That's one of the main things about without giving too much away. We really just need to talk about the cast and maybe the characters. And what was I guess, your favorite character? You
I
mentioned it
mean,
already, I think.
my favorite character was Kingo, Kumail Nanjiani. I think I would have loved to see a little bit more of him because he actually kind of just disappears for like the second half of the movie, pretty much. And I think it would have been fun to see a little bit more of him. But I will say I also liked Icarus a lot. Richard Madden's performance. I think he's a very interesting character in the Marvel universe. We don't really see that much character development in these characters as much as you get in one movie from him.
Right, right,
I really love that, and I love the fact that he's really conflicted, and things are happening to him that he can't really explain, and that's kind of the heart of the movie is kind of like how much do you have? I guess like the central role of the movie is like how much do you have faith in what you believe in and what you think based off of the other things is what is good and what is bad, and how much does your faith play into that? And I think
right.
his character really embodies that dilemma, and I think that's
Well,
that's what's really good about the film.
yeah, yeah, and I think it touches on a theme that we talked about in one of our forgotten films recently, in a certain way. And there's if I go into too much detail, it gives away
Right.
something in the film. But it actually talks about, and I'll just put it this way: it talks about, like you said, your faith and your purpose, and when it conflicts with your actual humanity, right?
Right.
In your feelings, right? And so how is that going to play out? How is that going to actually resolve itself? You've got a strong sense of purpose, and yet you develop this really powerful feeling and emotion, right? And it conflicts with your sense of purpose. And how is that going to actually play out? So that's kind of at the heart of the film. and so it was really interesting, the themes, of course. But like you said, this is also still a Marvel movie, and so there
Right.
you're trying to service that part of it, and yet you're trying to balance this really sort of emotional storyline and theme along with it, with a lot of characters. So
Right.
it gets hard to do, and I honestly think it's a really valiant effort at it. I just don't know that it actually came together as well as it could have.
Right. I agree with you on that. I mean, let's talk about that a little bit. Like, kind of like Chloe Zhao as this Marvel action director. Like, how do you think she did in that role? I think for me, I think I love the attempt,
Yeah, right,
and
right,
there's stuff in this film that's very very beautiful and very well done, but it just doesn't cohesively come together for me. And it does feel like two different films fighting for screen time to me. It seems like you're getting the Chloe Zhao, like, human story and the relationship story, and then you're putting in the Marvel spectacle and it's huge spectacle because you're talking about the Celestials and
right,
these beings that were these things that were created by Jack Kirby. And if you ever read the comics, these big cosmic beings, and just kind of the crazy cosmic nature that Jack Kirby created of this, like, the Marvel, I'm going to say Marvel universe, but the extended galaxy that exists around Earth and Marvel has got some of these fantastic creatures and just
right, right.
gods and things like that. And to
And yeah,
put
it's
those
amazing.
together, it's a really tough job, and I don't think it succeeds 100%.
No, I agree, and I think part of it. I'll take a little bit of a shot at some of the I guess not effects, so to speak. I mean, none of the effects were bad per se, but I didn't the the villains, the villains for
Right.
lack of a better
The
word.
deviants, we've already mentioned them,
Oh yeah,
right?
we talked about the deviants. So the deviants themselves didn't really feel, and I don't know, like the rest of the Marvel universe somehow feels real in a
Right.
way, but then these deviants didn't quite feel real to me, and I don't know what it was.
I
It
think it.
just
I think it has something to do with the action sequences were hard to follow for me. Like, and I think this comes from somebody who is not an experienced action director. Um, Especially some of
yeah,
the scenes, like the sequences where they're fighting in the jungle and it's like dark and it's hard to figure out what's going on and who's fighting who.
yeah,
And it does take talent to shoot an action film, otherwise it just becomes all just chaos and your eye doesn't know where to focus. And I feel like that was part of the issue, at least for me, and why the deviants didn't feel real. And then also just suffering from the typical Marvel villain
right, right.
problem. Right.
No, totally, totally. And I think another reason why, and again, this is, not to make an excuse, but she these Eternals all have different powers, right? They don't
Right.
all have the same powers. And so to keep up with all of the different powers within an action sequence is probably really difficult. You know what I mean? And so you don't know who can do what, at what time. And
Right.
like you said, sometimes it's dark and you don't even know who's fighting that deviant. You know what I mean? At the particular time, so you don't know what power to expect. In terms
Right.
of part of it. So it does. It does get a little bit chaotic. At times, which does take away a little bit from, the connection to the audience. You know what I mean? In my opinion.
Right, especially when they're fighting out of costume, it's really hard to kind of figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Like, and I think this is why superhero movies and superheroes in general have costumes, these big colorful costumes, so you can instantly pick them out,
Right.
And for a lot of the movie, they're not in their costumes. Some of it they are. And I think that's why the end sequence kind of works better than most of the other action sequences in the film, is because they are in costume at the end, and it is easier
Yeah.
to see what's going on, and we do get to spend time with these characters, now that we've known their powers, and they kind of almost
Exactly.
like pair off into their separate battles, and
Yes.
it's not so chaotic, and that
Yes.
works well. And I'm not saying that the other stuff isn't bad. It's just
Right. Right. It's not
a
bad.
little confusing.
Yeah, totally. And I think you make a great point, and I've seen other people kind of make fun of the colorful costumes, right? I've read a couple of other reviews, and like they're making fun of these colorful costumes. But you make a great point. Those give us our visual cues,
Right.
right? In superhero movies, we follow the colors, right? We follow the color scheme. Once we know which character is which, you know what I mean? It's easier for us to follow, and so it does help in a sense. Like you mentioned, the later action scenes are much easier to follow than the earlier ones.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you see, Cersei's wearing green. Okay, I know that's her,
Yep,
and
yep,
then Icarus is blue, and
absolutely,
and like, and it makes it much easier to follow, and I think that's kind of part of the rationale for that.
definitely.
Um,
I think so.
we jumped around a little bit, and I mentioned what my standout character is, but I didn't ever ask you, and maybe I'm just a selfish bastard who just wants to hear himself talk.
You don't, you don't care what I think.
But what was your favorite character?
Oh, you don't care what I think. No, I do think you're right. I liked the Kingo character a
Hmm.
lot, and I would have liked to see more of him because he provided a lot of comic relief, which of course Camille, is going
Right,
to do. He's fantastic at that. He does a lot of that, but he also has a lot of insight that the others didn't have. You know what I mean?
right,
And some really, really good points that he made during the film that I would have loved to see even more of that, of even more of him peeling back the layers and being able to see clearly because he's maybe the most high functioning eternal in terms of as part of the real
right.
world.
Well,
So
he feels like he's most connected to humans, even though
right,
he's
even though he's not the one who's the has theoretically the strongest connection to them, but
right,
he does seem to get them and understand how to be one, at least on the surface level, more than most.
right.
So I agree. That was my favorite character too. But I did like a lot uh, the Cersei character,
Mm,
and I respected the fact that she has this really big heart for the humans, right? That she's
right,
protecting, and her struggle and her pain, you know, eh, and her doubt, you know what I mean? It really shone through, and I think she did a great job at working with those levels of the storyline. So I did enjoy her and what she was bringing to the table in terms of this story.
and I also enjoyed Gilgamesh too. I wish I would have seen a little bit more of him too. He seems like a really
Yeah, he was
complex character for as little screen time as he has.
yeah, and then he also was one of the more selfless characters of the
Right.
group for sure.
Um, I think we talked about Chloe Zhao's director. We talked about let's talk about the tone a little bit, like, and maybe just kind of how does this fit into the MCU?
I think that's one of the things, and this is kind of why I feel like, and I think I mentioned it to you right afterwards, is that I felt like it wasn't connected enough. You know what I
Right,
mean? I think we've come to expect the connections between these films because they've done such a good job of interweaving all the different characters from different movies and yet weaving them in to all the movies. And then you get the Avengers movies where they're all together and they're all connected, and then these characters are completely disconnected from all of them. I mean, they
right,
reference them sometimes, but then they're so disconnected, and so that's another thing that really kind of takes it out of sort of is a little out of place in a lot of ways because they're not connected to any of them because we're so used to that in at least in the movie world.
right. And it kind of goes to me, kind of what I've bashed DC for in the past is not not setting up their characters and then bringing them together for what I mean. It's like this is almost like if Justice League and DC was like, well, we're just gonna like bring together some characters that haven't really been on screen and just kind of throw them all together.
Yeah,
um
yeah,
and, and then, like you said, like, yeah, they mention some of the stuff in the MCU, but then they don't really have a real connection with them. They just talk about it, and so it's kind of almost like if I didn't know better, like I know where the Eternals come from and I know the history of it. I've never been like a big Eternals fan. I don't really know the characters that well, but I do know that the Eternals have been around for a while and Jack Kirby created them and all this stuff. But if I didn't know that, I would just assume that this script was written and they shoehorned it into the Marvel universe.
Yeah, I mean, it honestly it does feel like the way only because of the expectation we have from watching all the
Right.
other Marvel movies. You know what I mean? And I think that harms it as a Marvel film. You know what I mean? And yet it isn't completely taken into the realm of a Chloe Zhao drama. You know what I mean? So it that's what kind of puts it slightly out of place as well in that regard.
And not going to talk about what's on the end credits scenes, but
Nope,
there
nope,
are two of them, so stick around.
definitely.
And I will say that even those don't connect it as much as I would have liked.
No,
Let me put
exactly.
it that way.
Exactly.
Um,
Those are some of the like least sort of you know I shouldn't say this, I guess, because we're telling people to stick around.
right,
But I
right.
mean,
No,
but
I
it's
mean,
like,
if you're a big Marvel fan, you'll get the references in them, but it's not bringing.
yeah, if you're a casual one though, you won't know
Right,
anything.
right, right. You'll be looking it up afterwards.
Right, or asking
Right,
somebody who you
right,
went with that knows what the hell that is. Like I asked you, like who the hell was that?
right. I mean, we don't want to go too deep down the hole. We don't want to give too much away. So I think it's best if we kind of stop the talk about it here and just kind of talk about what we maybe let's talk about the one thing we liked about it and one thing we didn't like about it, and then give our ratings.
Okay, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So
So go ahead.
I'll kick it off. The one thing I liked about it was sort of the depth of the themes that they were going for, and and again, a great cast. You can't. There's no two ways about it. Fantastic cast, so it's enjoyable to watch. So that's the best thing about the film. The worst thing about the film is how disconnected it feels on all those levels we just kind of talked about. At least I did, about how it doesn't feel like part of the Marvel universe when you want it to, and then the villains just seem a little out of whack. You know what I mean? They don't quite connect, as viscerally as other villains would, and like you mentioned, a little bit of a confusion, in terms of how the action sequence actually flow.
Right. For me, I think the best thing is kind of similar to you. I love what they were trying to do with it. I love that they were trying to explore these bigger themes and really delve into relationships, even though they might not have hit the mark exactly. Um, the thing I disliked about it the most was actually kind of I think the script itself was very clunky, and this is a problem I have with a lot of Marvel films is there's points where they just try to explain everything that's going on to the viewer, and it feels like you're watching somebody's PowerPoint presentation on like the
Right.
history of the Marvel universe.
Yeah. Yeah.
It happens in a lot of Marvel movies. Actually, I mean they did it in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 with the when Ego was showing him like the things, and they even did it in Loki at the end. But that was a little bit clunky to me. But overall, the script itself is like there's great moments in it, but the script is kind of falls apart on its own weight under its own weight.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's kind of hard to follow at the beginning. Like you don't really know what time period you're in half the time, and I think that was intentional, but it also is kind of confusing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. I think you're right.
So let's actually do this. Let's give our grades and then kind of like where we feel it fits. If we were to do our rankings, like where would you put it? Like
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
in general.
Well, I think I'm going to give it, a C plus. I'm going to give it a C plus, and then it would fit kind of in the bottom tier for me, just
Mm,
because of how disconnected it is from the other ones. We did our Marvel list recently,
right.
not too long ago, and the ones that are on the top of my list, you can tell, are the ones that are like the most connected, like, Avengers
Right.
Endgame and stuff like that. So that's why, just my feeling right now is it's in the lower tier just because of the fact that it's so disconnected.
Right. I'm also going to give it a C plus, actually. It's enjoyable enough and it's interesting. And I think that further viewings might increase my like of this film. It might also decrease. I don't know. It's this has been very conflicted on this film. I've gone back and forth a lot. But I also feel like that once these characters get introduced into the greater Marvel universe, that maybe we'll appreciate this one a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you might be right. And I'm looking forward to seeing the development of some of these characters because I think it's worth watching that journey. And you're right, this film may resonate more once they get integrated more into the universe.
And then for my rankings, I would kind of agree. It's probably in the lower third, but towards the top of the lower third, I would think. And I definitely liked it better than Black Widow, but less than Shang-Chi. So of the new ones that have come out this year.
Gotcha. No, and I think I agree that it's less than Shang-Chi for sure. And I agree it's in the upper echelon of the lower third, in my opinion, too. I agree.
Right. All right. So that's your preview into Eternals. Hopefully we didn't sway you one way or the other. Maybe you still go to see it if you're still interested in seeing it, hopefully. Or if you weren't going to see it, maybe you will now. I don't know. But, let us know after you see it what you think about our review and whether we were right or wrong. It'll be interesting to see how this does at the box office. It's a little bit more of a mature Marvel movie.
Yeah, definitely. And but I would say, if you love big movies, go see it. It's still worth it to see a big movie at the theater.
And honestly, what I would say is, even if you're not a Marvel fan,
you
might actually
like
enjoy this film more, actually, if you're not
absolutely.
a Marvel fan.
Mm-hmm.
So it does have that going for it. So
we'll see.
All right. Well, that about wraps it up for this week. We want to thank you guys for listening yet again. And like I said, let us know what you think after you see the film. I know we're getting it out early, but hopefully this will help you make a decision whether or not you want to go to the theater and see it or wait. And like as usual, we want you to please share this podcast. Please let people know about it. Please, write comments to us. We want to hear back from you.
Definitely.
And that just only helps get the word out on the podcast. And then finally, before we wrap up, I want to thank Eureka Failure. And I said their name correctly on the first try this time.
Nice. Good job.
They provide the music for us each and every week. You can check them out wherever you get streaming music. And then finally, Martin, let's hear your words of wisdom for this week.
Well, this week is a special week. And my words of wisdom are going to be very simple and probably turn some people off. But my words of wisdom are go Braves.
I don't think you'll be turning many people off. I think most of the country is behind the Braves.
I saw that. It was like a map of like Braves fans and Astros fans, and the Astros fans are basically Houston.
And that's it. And then everybody else is Braves. Yes, I think the Astros are the villains in this regard. So hopefully
they're the Patriots of the major leagues.
Right. There you go. All right. Well, we'll see maybe next week if we know if the Braves have pulled it out or not. But we'll see you again next time on the CinemATL Podcast. Thanks for listening.